The precise moment of clarity arrived when I was 22, a slow, cold dawn breaking over the wreckage of my childhood illusions. It wasn't just that my family played favorites. That was a simple, common cruelty. No, what they practiced was far more insidious. They weaponized affection, turning it into a tool of control and sabotage, ensuring one child's light was perpetually fed by snuffing out the others. The day before my life was supposed to change, I stood in the living room of our cramped, perpetually dim two-bedroom apartment. The air was thick with the scent of stale cigarette smoke and my mother's cheap air freshener, a cloying floral trying and failing to mask years of neglect. In my hands, I held my one good blazer, a charcoal gray treasure I'd found on a clearance rack after 3 months of saving my tip money. The steam iron hissed, a lonely sound in the afternoon chaos, as I carefully pressed out every wrinkle, my focus a fragile shield against the constant noise of our lives. This wasn't a glamorous place, this apartment with its water-stained ceilings and peeling linoleum. It was a holding pen, a place you were meant to escape from, and I was so close. After 3 grueling years of community college, juggling 2 part-time jobs that wore down my shoes and my spirit, I had earned this chance. It was more than a chance. It was a lifeline. An interview for an assistant project manager role at Sterling Vance, the top engineering firm in the city, a name spoken in hushed, reverent tones in my engineering classes. It was the kind of break that felt like a myth for people from my side of town, born into a house where dreams were treated as symptoms of a fever. My brother, Mason, breathed a different air. His world was one of effortless acquisition. A top-of-the-line MacBook Pro materialized on his desk the moment he murmured an interest in music production. A gently used but perfectly reliable sedan appeared in the parking lot when he complained that the bus commute to his part-time record store job was too arduous. His needs were treated as emergencies, his wants as necessities. Meanwhile, my existence was a study in careful maintenance. I was an expert in the art of preservation, patching the worn soles of my sneakers with industrial-strength super glue, a skill learned from a YouTube video watched on the library's slow Wi-Fi. I spent evenings with a needle and thread, painstakingly stitching the holes in my thrift store jackets, each stitch a tiny act of defiance against the planned obsolescence of my own life. But none of that history, none of that corrosive resentment, mattered in that moment. Tomorrow was a clean slate. Tomorrow, I would walk into that gleaming downtown tower and become someone else, someone worthy. That night, sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. I stayed up until the early hours of the morning, the city lights painting stripes across the living room floor. I paced the worn carpet, rehearsing my answers to potential questions until my voice was hoarse. I spoke to my reflection in the dark glass of the television screen, practicing a smile that looked confident, not terrified. Using the last of my ink cartridge, I printed 5 pristine copies of my resume, the paper still warm from the printer. I gathered my original documents, my diploma, my transcripts, my precious letters of recommendation, and laid them out in a neat, professional folder on the scarred wood of the kitchen table. It sat there like an altar to my future. I even skipped dinner, a familiar ache in my stomach preferable to the risk of being sluggish or bloated. Every single detail had to be flawless. There was no margin for error, not for me. Then came the morning. I woke not to an alarm but to a strange and unnerving silence. The usual cacophony of our mornings, the television blaring a morning show, my mother and Mason yelling over each other, was gone. There was only a heavy, expectant stillness. I slid out of bed, my feet cold in thin socks, and padded into the hallway. My gaze went immediately to the kitchen table. It was empty. The folder, my meticulously prepared arsenal, was gone. A cold spike of adrenaline shot through me. I rushed into the kitchen, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. I scanned every surface. Nothing. My eyes darted to the overflowing trash can, and I plunged my hand in without hesitation, feeling through coffee grounds and greasy takeout containers. Still nothing. My head snapped toward Mason's bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. A sliver of dread, sharp and familiar, cut through me. And there it was. On his cluttered desk, amidst tangled cords and empty energy drink cans, sat my folder. A dark, ugly stain of spilled coffee bloomed across the cover, warping the cardboard. I snatched it up, my hands trembling with a rage so pure it felt like ice water in my veins. Every single page inside was soaked through, the ink bleeding into illegible, heartbreaking swirls. My diploma, the culmination of years of sleepless nights, was a pulpy, ruined mess. Mason. The scream tore from my throat, raw and ragged. He sauntered out of the bathroom, shirtless, with white earbuds nestled in his ears, a smug, sleepy look on his face. He pulled one earbud out. "Chill out, Jess. It's just paper. You got a printer, don't you?" Tears of frustration and fury burned my eyes. This was my only copy of my diploma, I cried, my voice shaking. My letters of recommendation, the originals. He rolled his eyes, a gesture of supreme, dismissive boredom that he had perfected over a lifetime. Wow, so dramatic. Maybe if you didn't always act like you're better than everyone else, this stuff wouldn't happen. "I never did anything to you," I whispered, the injustice of it all choking me. He smirked, a cruel, knowing twist of his lips. "Exactly. That's the problem. I had no time for this." I spun around, my mind racing. I could try to reprint my resume. Maybe I could explain the situation. Maybe they would understand. I had to salvage what I could. But as I turned to leave, he moved, blocking my path. He shoved me hard. I stumbled back against the hallway wall. "Hey," I shouted, the shock giving way to a fresh surge of anger. "What is your problem? Stay out of my room." A low growl rumbled in his chest, an ugly, primal sound. Before I could process what was happening, his hand shot out and clamped around my upper arm, his fingers digging in like talons. He yanked me forward, and with a grunt of effort, shoved me into the narrow coat closet across the hall. My body hit the back wall with a sickening thud. A sharp, cracking pain exploded in my shoulder as it connected with a poorly installed shelf. The door slammed shut, plunging me into suffocating darkness. I heard a click, the distinct metallic sound of a lock turning from the outside. "Mason!" I banged on the door with my good fist, the wood vibrating under the impact. "Mason, open the door." This isn't funny. Nothing. Only the faint thumping of the bass from his earbuds through the door. I screamed again, louder this time, a full-throated cry of panic. "Mason, my interview. My interview was in less than 90 minutes. A frantic inventory began in my head. My phone was on my bed. My watch was on its charger by my pillow. My keys and wallet were in my purse, sitting on the chair in my room. The only things in this cramped, suffocating space were a few musty winter coats and the overwhelming, acrid stench of mothballs that stung my nostrils and made my eyes water. Time dissolved. 10 minutes passed, each second stretching into an eternity. Then 20. The panic began to curdle into a thick, suffocating dread. The air grew heavy and hot. My throat burned from screaming his name over and over. My palms were slick with a cold sweat, and my knees trembled so violently I had to lean against the wall to stay upright. And then I heard it. A sound that broke me far more than the lock on the door ever could. Laughter. It was coming from the kitchen. My mother's laughter, a light, tinkling sound that I had so rarely heard directed at me. "Mason," she said, her voice laced with a giggling indulgence. "You didn't." His reply was smug, triumphant. She needed to be taken down a peg. Always acting so high and mighty with her stupid job interview. A fresh wave of desperate energy surged through me. I pounded on the door with all my remaining strength. Mom, I'm in here. Let me out." Her voice, when it came, was closer now, just on the other side of the door, thick with irritation. "Oh, for God's sake, Jessica. You always have to make everything so dramatic. Your brother is under a lot of pressure, too, you know. I have a job interview." I screamed, my voice cracking with desperation. "Please, Mom, let me out." There was a moment of silence. It stretched, heavy and deliberate. Then her voice returned, no longer irritated but laced with a chilling, serene sense of purpose. "Maybe this is a sign, sweetheart. Maybe that job just wasn't meant for you." I slid down the door to the floor, the rough wood scraping my back. My nails dug into the thin, dirty carpet, searching for something, anything, to hold on to. Something inside me, a foundational beam of belief in some small, residual love, didn't just crack. It turned to dust. They weren't just indifferent bystanders to my struggle. They were the architects of it. They were in on it together. An immeasurable time later, the lock clicked again. The door swung open, revealing Mason leaning against the frame, a triumphant grin plastered on his face. He looked at his watch theatrically. "You're late," he chirped, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Better luck next time." I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I didn't look at my mother, who was now hovering in the kitchen doorway, refusing to meet my eyes. A vast, silent emptiness had opened up inside me. I simply stood up, my body aching, and walked past them. I didn't grab my purse, my phone, or my dignity. I just walked out the front door of the apartment and left. I missed the interview by 45 minutes. There was no chance for a reschedule. The polite, pitying voice of the receptionist on the lobby phone was the final nail in the coffin. That night, huddled on a park bench as the city grew cold, I cried harder than I had in my entire life. The tears weren't just for the lost opportunity, for the ghost of the woman I was supposed to become that day. They were for the cold, hard, undeniable truth that had been laid bare. My family did not want me to win. They needed me to fail, because my failure was the soil in which Mason's fragile ego could bloom. That was the last day I ever spoke to them. I moved in with my friend Tara, a goddess in human form who didn't ask questions and let me crash on her lumpy pull-out sofa for a month. While I was there, I began to rebuild. I worked soul-crushing temp jobs, filing papers in windowless basements and inputting data until my eyes burned. I took freelance drafting gigs that no one else wanted, the ones with impossible deadlines and demanding clients. I spent my nights illuminated by the blue glow of Tara's laptop, sending applications into the digital void for roles I knew were long shots. I was running on fumes, fueled by spite and a new, steely vow I had made to myself in the dark. If they wanted to bury me, I would become a seed. And what grew from that scorched earth would one day blot out their sun. 2 years passed. 2 years of absolute, unbroken silence. Not one phone call, not one half-hearted text, not one scribbled, guilt-ridden apology note. And in that silence, I thrived. My breakthrough came from one of those desperate late-night applications. A junior recruiter at a mid-sized civil engineering firm working at 3 a.m. found my resume. He called me the next day. "You don't give up, do you?" he'd asked, a note of admiration in his voice. I was offered an internship. That internship turned into a full-time job offer. That job offer, through sheer, relentless tenacity, turned into a project lead position. Within a single year, I was the youngest person in the company's history to oversee a multi-million-dollar site plan for a new municipal complex. While my family was posting smiling photos on Facebook from Mason's graduation party, a degree he barely earned after failing a core class and begging a professor for extra credit, I was on a plane to Dubai. Our firm had a joint venture on a new sustainable tech park, and I was there to consult. I didn't brag about it. I didn't post a single photo. I just built my life silently, relentlessly, brick by brick. But the past is a patient hunter. It always finds a way back. It happened on a random Tuesday afternoon. I was in my office, a corner space with floor-to-ceiling glass walls that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. The very skyline I used to dream of from my dingy apartment window. I was sipping a perfectly brewed coffee when an internal email popped up in my inbox. The subject line read, "New candidate shortlist, project coordinator interview round." My eyes skimmed the list of names, a routine part of my managerial duties, and then I froze. One name leaped off the screen as if it were on fire. Mason Trent. I blinked, my heart giving a painful lurch. It had to be a coincidence, a common enough name, surely. My fingers, suddenly numb, clicked on the attached resume file. The document loaded, and there it was, same age, same college, same smug, self-satisfied photo that made my stomach clench. He had applied to my company, and not just to my company. He had applied for a role on my team, a role that would report directly to me. The audacity of it was breathtaking. It was a violation. He was trying to walk into the world I had built from the ashes of the life he had helped burn down. My jaw tightened until it ached. I picked up my phone and dialed the extension for human resources. My voice was calm, steady, and cold as ice. "Hi, this is Jessica Trent," I said, using the name I now owned. "I see the new candidate list for the project coordinator role. I'd like to personally sit in on the final round interview with Mason Trent." He listed me as a personal reference. It was a complete and utter lie. But the HR manager didn't even blink. "Of course," they said. "That makes perfect sense." The next morning, Mason walked into the main conference room. He was wearing a shirt that was not only wrinkled, but looked like it had been pulled from the bottom of a laundry hamper. He was swimming in a cloud of cheap, aggressive cologne, a scent that tried to project confidence but only screamed desperation. And on his face was that same old self-important smirk, the one that had haunted my nightmares. He didn't recognize me at first. The terrified, broken girl he'd last seen was gone. My hair was darker, cut in a sharp, professional style. My suit was tailored, a deep navy that spoke of quiet authority. There was no stammer in my voice, no shame in my spine. I was a stranger to him. "Good morning," I said, my voice cool and even. "Thank you for coming in." He froze mid-stride, his smirk dissolving into a slack-jawed mask of disbelief. Jess. I tilted my head slightly, a gesture of mild curiosity. It's Jessica now, I corrected him gently. Please have a seat. The other hiring manager looked between us, confused, but I gave him a subtle, reassuring nod. Mason stumbled into the chair opposite me, his face pale. You work here. I glanced down at the folder in front of me, my own name and title printed neatly on the label. Lead project consultant, I read aloud softly. This is my department. He forced a laugh, a dry, awkward sound that echoed in the silent room. Wow, small world, huh? Smaller than you think, I replied, my eyes locking onto his. For the next 45 minutes, I conducted the most brutal interview of my career. I didn't ask about his strengths or weaknesses. I didn't ask where he saw himself in 5 years. I grilled him. I asked him every complex, technical question I could muster from the deepest wells of my expertise. I asked him about blueprint analysis and load-bearing calculations. I asked him about timeline balancing for concurrent construction phases and risk mitigation protocols for supply chain disruptions. I asked him about stress point modeling in foundational concrete. He was a shipwreck. He fumbled and stammered, stringing together buzzwords he'd clearly memorized from a website, but they formed no coherent thoughts. He waved his hands, trying to bluff his way through answers that were patently, embarrassingly wrong. By the end of it, the other hiring manager, a senior colleague named David, leaned over and whispered to me, his hand covering his mouth. He's not even close to ready for this. I gave a slow, deliberate nod. Before Mason could gather his things and flee, I stood up. One more thing, I said, my voice cutting through the awkward silence. I slid a piece of paper across the polished table toward him. It was a printout of a section of his resume. Your resume states that you completed an internship at Tarancon Construction, I said. It's a fortunate coincidence. I worked with their vice president of operations on a project last month. He says he's never heard of you. His face went from pale to ghostly white. Maybe I used a different name. An alias. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a near whisper for his ears only. You used my name. You went into our mother's house, into the drawer where she kept my old things, and you stole the letter of recommendation I wrote for myself years ago, and you forged it. His eyes widened in genuine shock. How did you? Because I wrote it, I said, the words like stones. I remember every single word. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. He looked at David, then back at me, cornered. Look, Jessica. I didn't mean to what? I interrupted, my voice still quiet but now honed to a razor's edge. To trap me in a closet, to ruin my one chance, or to stand in the kitchen and laugh with our mother while I screamed for help. You and Mom and Dad, you all thought that was just a funny little prank, didn't you? He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. He was a child caught in a lie. I don't want your apology, Mason, I said, my voice regaining its professional volume. I want you to understand something. He looked up, his eyes filled with a dawning horror. You didn't just try to ruin my interview that day. You tried to erase my entire future. And now, by some twist of what I can only call cosmic justice, you have walked into the one company in the one city where I am the one who writes the checks. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. His face was a mask of furious humiliation. This isn't over. Oh, I know, I said, allowing myself the smallest, coldest of smiles. Because the job you just interviewed for, the one you tried to get by lying and cheating, I've just offered it to someone else. His jaw twitched. Who, me, I said. He blinked, uncomprehending. I created a new hybrid role for myself this morning. Senior Project Director, it's one level above the position you applied for. Bigger title, bigger projects, more pay. You created it, he stammered. I've earned the right to, I said, standing to my full height. That's what people do when they build things instead of breaking them. He stormed out of the conference room without another word. I didn't watch him go. That day, I finally understood a profound truth. The best revenge isn't landing a good job, it's power. Silent, earned, and absolute. 3 weeks passed, then came the inevitable call. Jessica. The voice on the other end of the line was my mother's, thin and reedy, a sound I hadn't heard in 2 years. It's Mom. I sat in my downtown apartment, the one I'd bought, not rented, and sipped my evening tea. The city skyline twinkled behind me, a diamond bracelet draped over the horizon. Success had a strange and wonderful silence to it, a silence filled with peace, not applause. Your brother, she croaked, her voice thick with emotion. He's been rejected by 6 companies in a row. He's so depressed. He said you humiliated him. I didn't humiliate him, I said calmly, my voice a placid lake. He did that to himself the moment he decided to lie on his resume. A long, weary sigh traveled through the phone. We thought maybe you could recommend him somewhere. Help him out. He's your brother. I paused, letting the silence stretch, letting her sit in the weight of her own words. Like how you helped me out, I asked, my voice dangerously soft. By locking me in a closet and telling me it was a sign from the universe that I should fail. That was years ago. She snapped, her voice sharpening with defensive anger. Let it go, for heaven's sake. You never apologized, I stated, a simple, irrefutable fact. We didn't think you'd take it so seriously, she insisted. It was just a joke. He was stressed. He needed a win more than you did back then. That last sentence echoed in the chambers of my mind, the very core of their philosophy laid bare. The same pathetic excuse. The same casual, soul-crushing betrayal. Why do you keep protecting him? I asked, genuinely curious, after everything. Her answer was immediate, reflexive, because he's fragile. He's not like you, Jessica. You were always the strong one. No, I replied, the truth landing with quiet finality. I was just the quiet one. The one who learned to swallow my pain while you stood and clapped for the one who caused it. You're being cruel, she whispered, her voice cracking. No, Mom, I said, taking a final sip of my tea. I'm being fair. Click, I hung up the phone, but it didn't end there. 2 days later, a hand-delivered letter arrived at my office. I recognized my father's handwriting, shaky and thick with rage. We raised you, the letter began. We made sacrifices you can't imagine. The least you can do is help your brother get back on his feet. After everything we've done for you, you owe us. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound in my pristine office. Owed them. They owed me years of therapy. They owed me for the self-esteem I had to rebuild from rubble all by myself. They owed me for the rent I paid with bruised knuckles from menial labor and the hope I clung to during unpaid internships. Still, I wrote back. Not a letter. I wrote a check, a substantial one, but it wasn't addressed to them. It was made out to a nonprofit I had helped launch the year before, the Second Window Foundation. It was a mentorship and grant fund for young professionals who were overlooked, betrayed, or gaslit by the very people who were supposed to support them. On the memo line, I wrote, for every girl locked in a closet while the world called her dramatic. But I still wasn't finished. 6 months later, my company hosted its annual leadership summit. It was a major event with panel discussions, media coverage, and press from all over the country. As part of the closing ceremony, senior leaders were encouraged to bring a family member to honor on stage, someone who had supported them from the very beginning. I invited someone, not my mother or my father or my brother. I invited Mrs. Kim, the elderly janitor from the public library where I used to study. On nights when I had nowhere else to go, when I was between temp jobs and couldn't bear to face Tara's pity, Mrs. Kim would pretend she didn't see me huddled in a carol long after closing time. One brutal winter night, she found me shivering and gave me a cup of hot tea from her own thermos and a thick, hand-knitted wool scarf. That scarf, more than anything, got me through the coldest winter of my life. When I called her name on that brightly lit stage, she started to cry. I presented her with a heavy crystal plaque and a massive bouquet of flowers. She whispered into the microphone, her voice thick with tears, "You remembered me?" I leaned in and spoke to her, but also to the entire room. "I never forgot who saved me," I said. "I only chose to forget who didn't." Afterward, during the press interviews, a young, eager reporter asked me a question. "Ms. Trent, you're an inspiration. What's the greatest lesson you've learned from your family?" I looked straight into the camera, my gaze steady and unflinching, and I told the unvarnished truth. That blood might bind you, but betrayal is what defines you. And sometimes, the very people who try to break you are the only reason you learn how to rise. That clip went viral. It struck a nerve deep in the collective consciousness, but nowhere deeper than in my childhood home, where my brother was still unemployed and my parents were still furiously blaming everyone but themselves for their miserable lives. They tried to spin it, of course. They called old relatives, posted vague statuses on Facebook about family drama being blown out of proportion. But it was too late. The world had already heard my story, and the world recognized something they never would. I wasn't just the girl they had locked in a closet. I was the woman who now owned the building. I never wanted revenge, not really. I wanted freedom. The freedom to breathe. The freedom to succeed. The freedom to exist without their shadow falling over me. And in the end, I gave them exactly what they had given me all those years ago. Silence. Only this time, I wasn't the one trapped inside it. I was soaring high above it, holding the keys to every single door they had ever tried to shut in my face. And that job my brother thought he deserved, it's still open. But it's not for him. Not now. Not ever. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.